Welcome to GRE. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold, with lessons from being a landlord myself, including some tough ones, a simple formula for how to get wealthy and stay wealthy without paying any taxes legally. Then we focus on one of the most lucrative property markets in the United States, and it includes an invitation to you today on Get Rich Education. If you like the Get Rich Education podcast, you're going to love our Don't Quit Your Daydream newsletter. No AI here. I write every word of the letter myself. It wires your mind for wealth. It helps you make money in your sleep and updates you on vital real estate investing trends. It's free. Sign up at getricheducation.com/letter. It's real content that makes a real difference in your life, spiced with a dash of humor. Rather than living below your means, learn how to grow your means. Right now, you can also easily get the letter by texting GRE to 66866. Text GRE to 66866.
You're listening to the show that has created more financial freedom than nearly any show in the world. This is Get Rich Education.
Welcome to GRE, from Dorchester, Massachusetts to Westchester, Pennsylvania, and across 188 nations worldwide. I'm Keith Weinhold, and you're listening to Get Rich Education. I trust that you're prosperous and well in a still somewhat new year here. Along with my usual GRE research of markets, trends, teams, and properties, I've been serving on and writing for the Forbes Real Estate Council. Next week, we have a thought-provoking show on whether America is actually undergoing a silent depression that's creeping upon us, but I've got an important story to tell you today. It's really rather formative and foundational to the, I suppose, mind spring of abundantly minded real estate ideation. When I bought my first seminal fourplex building for $295,000 about 20 years ago, there was an identical fourplex right next to it. It was bought about the same time as mine, and it was bought by another guy about my age. His name's Patrick. We each had these blue fourplexes next to each other, and I still remember his full name, although I'll just stick with his first name, Patrick here. He was a data and security engineer, really sharp guy. And by the way, he only paid $275K for his nearly identical fourplex next to mine. And since I paid $295, I felt like I overpaid. But he and I, we got to know each other a little bit. We kind of had a similar path, all right? As owner-occupants, each living in one of our 4 units, and renting out the other 3 and doing that right next to each other, we would compare notes as to how it was going with being an on-site landlord. And, Patrick and I, we both kind of figured out that we were living for free. And that's because the 3 $725 rent incomes, they were enough to pay our mortgages and our operating expenses on the buildings. But after that, there was really nothing left over. But we effectively had a free place to live in one of the fourplex units. Now, a few times, Patrick and I collaborated on some projects together to improve things around our contiguous fourplex buildings. And I specifically remember that one day we had bought materials at Home Depot, and then we met outside to build a fence together. And it was just this cheap post and rail style fence that we made with 2x4s and painted blue. It's something that he and I built at the back of our buildings in order to keep vagrants from cutting through our yards. This was in Anchorage, Alaska, and Anchorage has a lot of these paved bike paths all throughout the city, and vagrants also use those to get around, and we had this bike path right behind our fourplexes. Now, as you know, I am not that good at building stuff or fixing broken stuff, okay? But this fence project that we were doing, it wasn't too complicated, and I had Patrick right there to help. Now, by this time, I had probably owned the fourplex for about 2 years, and I was really just starting to get this realization for what real estate investing could do for me, because I had only made a small down payment yet the fourplex had appreciated quite a bit. This was around 2005, and I didn't even know that that effect was called leverage yet. But anyway, Patrick and I, as we're building this fence together, we're talking about our properties, he said one thing I can distinctively remember, and it's something that a lot of people say, and that is, I can't wait until I have this property paid off. Now, back at this time, there was no GRE yet. I'm still rather fresh and new to real estate investing. This fourplex was the only property that I owned, but already this desire to have the property paid off, that is not a feeling I shared. That did not resonate with me, okay? I responded to him with something like, oh, do you think that's the best use of your money? All right, because I had a mortgage interest rate of 5 3/8 at the time, and his was probably pretty close to that too. Well, I told him that I want to keep the debt on my property because instead I could invest my spare dollars elsewhere and get a better return than 5 3/8. And that fact would be true even if my interest rate were 8 or more. Really, his only reply to that is that he just simply doesn't like having debt. That's about the only answer that he had, even though it's usually irrational to pay off good debt like that. Now, my financial freedom ideas, they were still in their nascent period back then. I sure wasn't going around and saying that financially free beats debt free or anything like that. I wasn't quite putting it that way yet. I sure didn't say, hey, don't you know that the scarcity mentality is abundant and the abundance mentality is scarce? Or that compound interest is weak and compound leverage is powerful? Or that a rich man digs for gold and a poor man is concerned with the cost of a shovel? But I already knew that if you focus on debt paydown, like taking all your extra dollars to accelerate the principal paydown on just, say, one fourplex building, you are just burrowing one deep hole into the property. It's like a deep hole that might even cave in. Instead, wealth is built by expanding your portfolio size, more doors, more income, more leverage, serving more people with housing, and actually more safety because you can be in more markets that way. See, you gotta give your money multiple jobs. So the lesson is Patrick and I were already on divergent mindset paths because by that time I had read books like Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and it got me thinking differently. You know, it was the whole don't get your money to work for you, get other people's money to work for you, and that whole thing.
I don't even think about it. I'm built a little differently, I guess, because I have had people come up to me and say, how do you do it, sir? How do you do it? I don't even think about it.
Oh, geez. I do it because if you don't want to run with the herd, then you've got to think and act differently in order to diverge from the herd. Keep leveraging more income property. So Patrick and I built the fence that day, and I don't really know how much he paid down his building's principal balance, which is a lot like sending off your dollars to go die. But I can tell you what I did. Okay, about another year went by after building the fence, so now we're into year 3 of me owning the fourplex. What I did is I kept the building, but I got a home equity line of credit second mortgage on the fourplex, and then I used those funds to make a down payment on a single family home so that I could live off-site and get some privacy from my fourplex tenants. So this is the start of me acting divergently from the herd. It was the opposite of paying down my property, borrowing against it. Instead, I took more debt out on it, which is a tax-free event, by the way, and you could go to 90% loan to value back then. Yes, that's back when dollars were being lent out more freely. I mean, that's what wealthy people do. What do wealthy people do when they need money? They just keep borrowing against the value of their assets, and it's a tax-free event since the IRS does not tax debt. So if you want to be wealthy, that's what you do. What I also did by doing this was expand my portfolio size, increase my leverage ratio, and since I vacated one of the 4 fourplex units, now I had 4 rent incomes rather than 3. I mean, that is some don't live below your means, grow your means stuff right there. And then 2 years after that, I kind of did the same thing again. I borrowed against my properties and I used the funds as a 10% down payment on a second, more expensive fourplex building. So now I lived in a single family home and I had 2 fourplex buildings. And then a few years later, when equity accumulated in those 2 fourplex buildings, I sold them and did a 1031 exchange into 2 larger apartment buildings. Everything I've done so far is tax-free, all expanding the portfolio, all serving more tenants, all reducing my risk despite increasing my debt because the tenant pays the debt for me. And it was all with almost none of my own money. Instead, it's just using accumulated equity from one property and rolling it into more. Just keep rolling those same funds forward. Okay, so that is all what I'll call one line of leveraged equity. And by then, I was beginning other lines because I started to buy property out of state and in multiple states. And it wasn't until 2012 that I discovered that buying across state lines is possible, it's proven, and that's where the real deals are. I mean, you might want to own some properties in your local market, or you might not. But see, the thing is that there are 387 MSAs, metropolitan statistical areas, in the U.S. as defined by the Census Bureau. So if you're only buying in your local market, chances are you're not getting the best deals. And another way to think about your portfolio's growth in your real estate equity management is to consider the fact that you don't have substantial equity in your home right now because you paid it down. You have equity in your home because it increased in value. So you can use equity from your home to buy perhaps 10 other rental homes as long as you can control cash flow. So it's about trading away antiquated notions of safety and security in exchange for freedom. But now, most of Patrick and I's conversation about being neighboring fourplex landlords for a few years was, I would say, more anthropogenic, meaning relating to human activity. Yes, that is dealing with tenants. Because although the discipline is called property management, it could just as well be called tenant management. And early on, this is where my naivete got exposed, like with a tenant that was late on the rent, and he said he'd pay it, but then he didn't pay rent, and I had to evict him early on. I inherited that tenant from the previous owner, so I did not get to screen him. Now, 3 weeks ago, here on our Christmas episode, when we did How the Rent Stole Christmas, that was fun, I shared a lot of my tenant relations tips with you on how to help ensure that your rent gets paid. But today, you can do something that you couldn't do when I got started in real estate. You can report your tenants' rent payments to the credit reporting agencies and affect their credit score. So if you're a do-it-yourself landlord today and you're doing your screening, I would tell prospective tenants that before they even apply for your vacancy, and put it in a positive light. Make it known that one attribute of renting from you is that with their timely rent payments, it can help their credit score. So position it positively rather than any sort of threat, and it's going to help you get more timely rent payments if that's been a problem for you. Yes, institute reporting to the credit bureaus, the credit scoring agencies, Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. That is another handle that you have as a landlord today. Yes, the only guarantee is that there will be some inevitable real estate problems for you, but like problems with anything else in life, your mind and my mind, we tend to inflate the significance of problems. Whether it's a tenant that you just can't get to change their AC filters, or an unexpected water leak, or an overgrown tree that you have to pay an arborist to handle, or a persistently late-paying tenant, oftentimes your fear about the problem is worse than the problem itself. In fact, it was the Stoic philosopher Seneca that said, there are more things likely to frighten us than there are to crush us. We suffer more often in imagination than in reality. Gosh, isn't that so on point? Yeah, we suffer more in imagination than we do in reality. You could say that about most any problem that you've ever had in your life. Now, some things have changed and some things have stayed the same since I began my real estate journey with that blue Anchorage fourplex. It looks like there are some signs of hope for financial education in the near future here. Formal financial education, when it was recently announced that Pennsylvania, my native state, will become the 25th U.S. state to have a formal standalone financial education class in high school. Hey, that's a really good start. But one constant seems to be that the dispiriting saying, don't live below your means, that still seems to trump the aspirational, grow your means. And it's not about whether a person is intelligent or unintelligent in adopting one or the other. It's really more about having the ability to think freely. Now, today, I have a friend that's the chief financial officer, the CFO of a publicly traded corporation. He and I got together a few times last year, and he can talk about earnings reports and EBITDA, and he knows that language of business. He's a super sharp guy. But he told me that he has his house, his family's primary residence, paid off. And I asked him about that, and I told him that I keep the maximum debt on mine and why. Now, your primary residence, it's not like a fourplex where your tenant pays your debt for you, but you've got to pay your own debt on your own home, yet the mortgage rate on a primary residence is lower than it is on a rental. So the question persists, is that really the best place to park your dollar? Is that where it's doing multiple jobs? You've got to consider that it's illiquid and its ROI is zero. No, I didn't quite put it that starkly with my CFO friend, but in any case, and remember, this is a chief financial officer. He's a guy that's good with money. At least he did give me this. He said, from a financial perspective, he knows that it makes 0 sense to have a paid-off home. It just makes him feel better. And, I accepted that. That's just not the way that I view the world, and that's okay. Coming up next, an in-house chat with one of our GRE investment coaches as we talk about the real estate market overall, controlling your rising expenses as a real estate investor, and about real estate in the Southeast, Alabama, as well as an invitation for you with some pretty generous incentives that I think you're going to be excited about. I'm Keith Weinhold. You're listening to Get Rich Education. For a lender that's a specific expert with income property, you need Ridge Lending Group, NMLS 42056. In GRE history, from beginners to veterans, they provided our listeners with more mortgages than anyone. It's where I get my own loans for single-family rentals up to fourplexes. Start your pre-qualification and chat with President Chaley Ridge personally. They'll even customize a plan tailored to you for growing your portfolio. Start at ridgelendinggroup.com, ridgelendinggroup.com. I'll just tell you, for the most passive part of my real estate investing, personally, I put my own dollars with Freedom Family Investments because their funds pay me a stream of regular cash flow, and returns are better than a bank savings account, up to 12%. Their minimums are as low as $25K. You don't even need to be accredited for some of them. It's all backed by real estate, and I kind of love how the tax benefit of doing this can offset capital gains and your W-2 job's income. And they've always given me exactly their stated return, paid on time. So it's steady income, no surprises while I'm sleeping or just doing the things I love. For a little insider tip, I've invested in their Power Fund. To get going on that, text family to 66866. Oh, and this isn't a solicitation. If you want to invest where I do, just go ahead and text family to 66866.
This is Rich Dad, Poor Dad author Robert Kiyosaki. Listen to Get Rich Education with Keith Weinhold. Don't quit your daydream.
Hey, Hey, well, today I'd like to welcome in our terrific investment coach, Aundrea, for an in-house chat here. How's it going, Aundrea?
Hey, Keith, doing good. Trying to recover from the holidays. How are you?
Yeah, it's still a fairly new year here. The holidays were a few weeks ago. With the advent of a new year, Aundrea, a lot of people make a resolution to increase the residual income, often by expanding the real estate portfolio. So really just taking the temperature here, how's your feel about the pulse of today's income property market?
It's been interesting the past year, right? We've had a lot of ups and downs. I would say what we've typically seen from the different markets across the U.S., particularly the Southeast, which is what we're going to talk about a little bit more today. We have seen that there's still inventory out there right now. We've seen interest rates slightly go down, not significantly, but we have seen some decreases. And we're seeing pretty steady demand for income properties right now.
Yeah, mortgage interest rates down more than 1% from their peak in October last year. Yeah, oftentimes real estate and the pulse of the market comes down to supply and demand. To your point, the demand sure is not going away. We've got population growth and we have a lot of pent-up demand from the huge millennial cohort. And then over there on the supply side, there is so much new building in the multifamily space, but there's really a dearth of supply and a dearth of new supply coming onto the market for 1 to 4 unit properties.
Yes, there is. And we're seeing a lot of that growth, like I mentioned, in the Southeast, which are the markets that I personally invest in. And I have a lot of our listeners go to purchase as well. So very excited about what we're seeing happen in 2024 and what that means for our investors.
Yeah, now back at the beginning of the year, two prominent moving companies, U-Haul and United Van Lines, they released their migration report for the year ended last year. And the southeast quadrant of the nation, by far, that had the most net migration growth states in their list, easily.
It did. And I think that's going to continue. We're going to talk about that a little bit.
When we pull back and just think nationally before we go into the Southeast, oftentimes investors, of course, are thinking about controlling their expenses. That's been a big issue that bubbled up last year. It's probably going to continue to be one this year. So we're talking about investors controlling their expense side, from mortgage rates to property insurance rates that have really spiked. So do you notice any trends with controlling investors' expense side, since you and I are active investors ourselves?
A couple things that I've noticed in the Southeast and my personal investments, as well as some of the markets that we have turnkey relationships with, Keith, we are seeing insurance continue to go up just a little bit, but we're not seeing those ridiculous, doubling that we saw over the last 2 to 3 years. So it's going up, not seeing doubling. So I'm hopeful that that continues and we're not seeing that fast, rapid increase. The other thing that we're seeing a lot of is a lot of our turnkey companies that we work with, we're starting to see kind of property management costs stabilize or go down in certain areas. So we're seeing that expense decrease. The other thing is we're not seeing as rapid of increases in material costs and labor costs right now. Still going up. Things are not, going down by any means, but we're not seeing those costs go up as much either. So this is allowing the investors to have a little bit more money in their pocket than they did over the last 2 to 3 years during the pandemic.
Yeah, it's not that big of a consideration for an investor on their expense side. But yes, I do see more evidence of lower property management costs. So can you talk to us more about that trend? Is it more of the infiltration of technology into the space that's bringing the cost down for property management?
Such a great question. And I do think that is part of it for sure. We're seeing a couple of things here. We're seeing some of these smaller kind of mom and pop property management companies, they're stepping out. They can't really afford to keep up with the technology and all the changes that are happening in the property management space. And what's causing that to happen is these property management companies that can do a little bit larger scale, they're able to get these nicer systems and this better technology and things for their investors to be able to use, as well as their tenants. And we are seeing that bring the cost down of property management a little bit.
You're seeing more infiltration of institutional investment money into the single-family rental space and rentals up to 4 doors per unit. And those companies, those institutional investors, have deep pockets, and they have the ability to go ahead and implement a lot of these technology systems. So that's making it so that others, including these smaller mom and pop property management companies, they need to keep up with their technology that's lowering property management costs, or else these mom and pop property managers are going to be put out of business. So there are so many pros and cons about institutional investment money coming into the space. And that's just one of the potential pros for everyday investors.
You're exactly right. I have nothing to add to that because you were spot on with that comment.
Anything else just in general that you see across the real estate market that you really think a real estate investor needs to know today?
One thing that I really think is important for people to keep in the back of their minds is I talk to a lot of our listeners who are very, very interested in dipping their toes in the water, or they've been kind of sitting to the side the last few months, kind of seeing what will happen with the market. Right now is the time for you to invest. If you wait a few months, I suspect in several of these markets, you may see interest rates come down, but you're going to see prices go up and you're going to see even more of a lack of inventory. So just kind of keep that in mind as you're thinking about where to invest, how to invest, and when to invest.
Here at GRE, we've often talked about the fact that higher mortgage interest rates actually correlate with higher prices, not lower ones. And I think some people were sitting on the sidelines saying, is that really going to be the case? Yeah, we saw mortgage interest rates triple and prices still went up. A lot of people think rates are poised to fall this year. It's probably going to put more upward pressure on prices. Aundrea, when we talk about one controlling their expense side, I think something that a lot of people overlook, and this is so simple, is buying in a state or buying in a market that simply has low property prices, because that's the best indicator of giving you a high ratio of rent income to purchase price, low-priced states.
That's right. Yep. And so I've mentioned this in the last couple of minutes, but the Southeast and the Midwest are those two areas where you really do have those lower cost properties that even if you're an entry level investor, you can get in there pretty easily.
And now we've had a lot of investor interest in Florida with all their in-migration. We still like that market, but prices have really run up there. So we've increasingly had investor interest from our followers and people that you help coach about another Southeastern state.
That's right. So that market is Alabama. So we have had a provider that has been offering turnkey, fully renovated properties and sometimes new construction in the Alabama market. And it has been an absolute wonderful market for our listeners that have actually invested in that area.
Alabama, compared to a place like Florida, has substantially lower property prices. When we talk about you as an investor here controlling the expense side, Alabama has the second lowest property taxes in the entire nation, second only to Hawaii. So that's something that's really baked into your recipe here with income property in Alabama.
That's right. I mean, there's been increases in property taxes across the U.S. over the last few years as values have gone up. But of course, in Alabama, you haven't seen those fast rises. And because the rates are so low, it's going to adjust kind of accordingly with the market. So you're not going to see anything creep up really quickly there as well.
In general, in a lot of jurisdictions, you see property taxes increase commensurately with the value of your property. And Aundrea, we've been in Alabama with a really renowned provider there that provides property almost statewide across Alabama. And you're going to co-host with them on a GRE live event for Alabama income properties, because right now they're really offering a good set of incentives and they have available properties. So tell us some more about that.
Like you mentioned, they have properties across the state. So you have kind of an option of which geography within Alabama that you would want to invest in. They have different kind of price points as well. And then like you mentioned, they have some very exciting incentives. And I don't think that I have seen an incentive this good as far as property management goes in a really long time. So what they are offering our listeners is called the 333. And essentially what this is if an investor wants to purchase up to 3 properties, you can purchase 1, 2, or 3. You're not committed to a certain number. You're going to get a 3% property management fee for 3 years on these 3 properties. Once you go over 3, it does revert back to the normal price of 9% for the property management, but you can get 3%, which is kind of crazy.
So the incentive offered on this GRE live event that you're going to co-host tomorrow night is that 333 incentive. Let me just review it so that we have it right. For a limited time, there's going to be a 3% property management fee for 3 years on up to 3 properties.
That's exactly right. Yep.
That is really attractive when it comes to controlling the investor's expense side.
It certainly is. That's not the only incentive they have, though. So they're also offering across their entire inventory 5.99% interest rate on the purchases of any of these properties. And that's really low.
That is really compelling, yeah. So that's substantially lower even than what you can get for an income property rate today. Income property rates are typically, something like 0.75% higher than what you typically see on that 30-year fixed rate mortgage. And that's what we're talking about here. This builder and provider buying down your mortgage rate for you to 5.99% interest. Do you know about the terms on that? Is that 30-year fixed amortizing or?
Yes, that is 30-year fixed amortizing. So you're not looking at anything variable. You're looking at kind of your set mortgage payment every single month, which is really nice.
Yeah, that's like rolling back the clock 2 to 3 years with getting a mortgage rate like that. That's really going to help a number of people. Aundrea, I'd like to get your thought. Do you have very many people that you work with here, our followers, when you're coaching, that want to self-manage remotely, or do they want that remote property manager?
I don't think in the past year I've spoken with one investor that planned to actually purchase and manage themselves remotely. Everyone wants to use the property management function, which this particular provider does have property management in-house.
So they will want to use that 3% property management fee, not being a do-it-yourselfer. They're probably taking after me. I don't want the job of property management. That's just a business I don't really want to have that much to do with. I love to outsource that duty to somebody else. A big reason that a lot of people self-manage their property is because they just don't have that much of a gap between their income and their expenses. So when you buy in an investor advantage market like Alabama, where you have a high ratio of rent income to purchase price, you can therefore have one of those expenses be your property manager, especially when it's only 3% in this case. So those are some really good incentives, the 3.33 and a 5.99% interest rate. Is there anything else you can tell us, especially on tomorrow night's live event, with what markets within Alabama we're going to be talking about?
Yeah, so we're going to focus on a couple different markets. We're going to look at Huntsville as well as Birmingham. We may also talk about some markets that are in the Southeast that they have some properties in outside of Alabama. So just stay tuned. I'm not promising that, but we may talk about that a little bit depending on how things go. The other thing that I think is really important to keep in mind is we're going to have a live buying opportunity. So we're actually going to show you some of the properties that are available right now. You're going to be able to see all the financials on them, and you can reserve them as soon as you want, right after we get off it, while we're on it. However you want to do it, we can buy it tomorrow.
That is a really actionable event. Tell us more about the event, how one can register and be on there with you so that they can have their questions answered by you and the provider in real time. That's really the benefit of you attending tomorrow.
You can go out to grewebinars.com. You'll be able to register there. It'll be at the very top of the page. Make sure that, you fill in all of your information. You'll get an automatic email that'll remind you to get onto the webinar tomorrow, and you can jump on. You're going to have the opportunity to ask live questions. So we're going to be there to answer them, and then we'll go through the properties. And if you're ready to reserve, I can hop on a call with you right after we get off of the webinar and kind of talk through what inventory that we have available and help you through that process.
Well, Aundrea, before I ask you if you have any last thoughts, just summing it up here, I really encourage you, the listener, to join the live virtual event because you can see real properties like Aundrea mentioned in an investor advantage market and get any questions answered that you have answered in real time, whether it's about the cash flow or property insurance costs or your property manager. It's GRE's live event for Alabama income properties tomorrow, the 16th at 8 p.m. Eastern. So go ahead and sign up right away at grewebinars.com. Any last thoughts, Aundrea?
No, I'm just excited to see more faces, see old faces, and talk to you all about the market and the properties that are available.
This is really going to help a lot of people. Thanks so much for coming back onto the show.
Thank you.
Yeah, here's an opportunity for you to learn about a market and connect with Aundrea. Of course, when we talk about the Alabama real estate market, that entails many market varieties and geographies. In fact, Alabama has 12 of the nation's 387 MSAs. I very much encourage you to attend the live event from the comfort of your home. It's for you if you want to learn about a market and really the fundamentals that drive investor advantage markets. You can meet Aundrea and perhaps add some property to your portfolio. It can give you long-term equity growth and short-term cash flow. And I have actually been inside, walked Alabama properties with this provider, and it is exactly what they do. This isn't some side venture, and they've been in business a long time too. They serve out-of-area investors and they do the management for you too. This is GRE's live event for Alabama income property. And overall, in America, entry-level homes are few. You're going to have a chance to own scarce assets that seemingly everyone is going to want over time. It's coming up fast. It's tomorrow night, the 16th at 8 p.m. Eastern. Sign up now. It is free at grewebinars.com. Until next week, I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. Don't quit your daydream.
Nothing on this show should be considered specific, personal, or professional advice. Please consult an appropriate tax, legal, real estate, financial, or business professional for individualized advice. Opinions of guests are their own. Information is not guaranteed. All investment strategies have the potential for profit or loss. The host is operating on behalf of Get Rich Education, LLC exclusively.
The preceding program was brought to you by your home for wealth building, GetRichEducation.com.